Chapter 16. Not a sound passed their lips. Mucius, who had run on ahead to the cemetery, stopped under 3 sycamore trees not far from the mausoleum Udo had described, and he beckoned to his friends to join him.
Avoiding the route through the city, they had instead gone single file from the Escaline hill down a lonesome, narrow path along the old walls of Servius Tullius's fortress up to the huge gate at the Via Salaris. On their way, they armed themselves with sticks they picked up in a clearing in case they were attacked by dogs. Their luck was good. They advanced rapidly and without incident and entered the cemetery half an hour before midnight. Publius, Julius, Rufus, Flavius, and Antonius gathered around Mucius. He put his finger to his mouth. "Speak softly," he reminded them. "Later, when those 2 cutthroats get here, we'll have to be as quiet as the dead around us." "Sometimes the dead turn over in their graves," Antonius said. Mucius let that pass. "You know the ex-gladiator is a monster," he said. "The mysterious fat man probably is no gentle lamb either. Just try not to breathe too heavily." "I can hold my breath for hours," Antonius bragged. "Then we can bury you here, too," Publius snickered. A cock crowed in one of the small farms somewhere in the distance. "It's a bad omen for a cock to crow at midnight," Rufus said. Flavius already despaired of breathing the way he should. He could feel his heart beat loudly in his throat. A cemetery was no place for him. Tiro had cleverly advised them to dress in dark capes. Claudia had provided them with 6 capes of brown goatskin. Caius, who was spoiled, had almost a dozen of them hanging in his wardrobe. The full moon shone rather brightly behind a thin layer of clouds, and it bathed the cemetery in a pale light. The tombstones and monuments, whose niches held urns containing the ashes of the dead, threw grotesque shadows over the ground. Some looked like spirits of the underworld reaching out their arms to seize them. "Pull off your sandals now," Mucius said. "We won't have time later when we start following them." "We must not be heard," Rufus protested. He didn't like giving up his sandals. They were made of the finest calf skin, a gift from Claudia for his 12th birthday. "We'll pick them up tomorrow," Julius said. "That's what you say," Antonius said. "In the meantime, they will already have been stolen by 25 thieves." "You don't have to leave your sandals here," Mucius said. "Tie the laces together and wrap them around your waist. But listen closely now. 3 stone paths lead away from the mausoleum, unfortunately at a great distance apart. Since we don't know which of the 3 the ex-gladiator and the mysterious fat man are taking when they leave the cemetery, we're going to have to split up. Publius and you, Rufus, hide on both sides of the left path, there off to the rear. Antonius and I will take the center one, and you, Julius and Flavius, watch this path here going past the sycamores. Which of us is going to follow the 2 men depends on which paths they choose." "You mean if they go by Flavius and me, we will be the ones to follow them?" Julius asked. "That's right," Mucius said. "We others will be too far away to be able to join up with you. Besides, there are too many tombs and monuments between the paths." He had pulled off his sandals and tied them around his waist. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Hail, Mucius! We, about to die, salute you," Publius said with a smile. "One more thing," Mucius said. "Those who stay behind will meet in front of the mausoleum after the others follow the conspirators. Then count to 100 and return along the fortress wall to Claudia's." "Wait, that won't work," said Julius. "Why not?" Mucius asked. "We can't do this to Xantippus. He's already been waiting 5 hours for us to tell him what happened to Caius." "Immortal gods," Mucius moaned. "In all the excitement, I'd forgotten about Xantippus. He'll be waiting for us in a rage," Publius said. "All right," Mucius said. "Instead of going to Claudia's, go first to Xantippus. Tell him everything that's happened. Whoever is doing the following should go to Xantippus's place, too, once they've carried out their mission. The others will wait for them there. Now steal away to your post and hide yourselves so well that nobody will be able to see you from either the paths or from the mausoleum. Again, not a sound must pass your lips." "I'm afraid I won't be able to hide very close to the path," Julius said. "You know there are times when my stomach growls pretty loudly." "Your stomach has no reason to growl," Mucius hissed in exasperation. Claudia's dinner for us was more than plentiful. He gave Antonius a sign, and they disappeared. Publius and Rufus vanished too. Earlier, the boys had told Claudia that they hadn't eaten all day and they were starved. Claudia had called the house steward and ordered him to prepare some food. "I'm afraid I'm in no condition to make you a proper meal in a hurry," she said, excusing herself. "That's all right," Mucius said. "I'd even eat shoe leather." The boys had stretched out on 3 divans placed around the low alabaster table. In no time, a dozen slaves hurried to them with golden platters, knives and spoons, with silver goblets and glass bowls filled with sweet-smelling water for cleaning the fingers. A second swarm of slaves brought plates of cold meat, smoked fowl, and frogs' legs in wine sauce. There were, besides, thick slices of farm bread, heated raisin rolls, and salt sticks. While the boys helped themselves energetically, several slaves placed jugs of Chinese porcelain on the table. Lemon juice sweetened with honey was in some of them, fresh milk from the country in others. For dessert, 6 Syrian boys served assorted cheeses. Then they passed around grapes, dates, apples, walnuts, and caraway biscuits. After eating, the boys could hardly keep their eyes open. Claudia told them to lie down and sleep as they still had plenty of time before their departure. "If we go to sleep, I won't get up again before next week," Publius said. Claudia had to laugh in spite of her concern. "You'll wake up in plenty of time," she said. "My father just bought one of the new water clocks. It's there on the table. You set it for any time you wish, and it will ring so shrilly you'll fall out of bed. I'll have it set for an hour before midnight. I'll get up then, too, to wait for you to come back." Flavius suddenly realized to his dismay that his mother would be worried if he wasn't home by midnight. This thought also had been disturbing his friends. Their mothers definitely would understand, but the boys were afraid they wouldn't be allowed to go out again once they went home. They discussed the matter. Claudia had finally proposed to send Herodes, Caius's private tutor, to tell all the mothers that their sons had been invited to a moon festival by Caius and would stay overnight in the villa Venetius. The boys agreed to the idea and lay down to sleep. Now Flavius was thinking longingly of the good food and the comfortable divan. He lay doubled up behind a tombstone on a mound of earth that was covered with pebbles. To his right, a tall fir tree towered against the night sky. In front of his face, a wreath of mildewed flowers leaned against the monument. Something crawled over his legs, a spider or an ant, but he dared not move. The ground beneath him was damp and smelled sour. The grave must have been filled just a short time before. Next to him, an open grave gaped like a giant black mouth. Suddenly, a muffled screaming sounded over his head and shook him to the marrow of his bones. He jumped to his feet in terror and saw an owl flap away. Taking a deep breath of relief, but still feeling wobbly, he lay down again. His friends were nowhere in sight. He felt like a man alone in this eerie world. The waiting time seemed to last an eternity. A golden shower of stars swept across the heavens. He wondered how this was possible, for, after all, the stars were only holes in the firmament through which the divine light from the world of the gods shone through. At last he heard footsteps crunching along the path. He peered carefully around the corner of the tombstone and quickly pulled his head back. The mysterious fat man stamped by so close to him that he could have touched him. The man again wore his cloak, and the cowl was pulled over his nose. From 2 holes in the hood, his eyes glittered in the moonlight. Flavius's friends also had noticed the fat man and were observing him from their hiding places. He made straight for the mausoleum and walked impatiently back and forth in front of it. Occasionally he would stop a moment and listen. As if flung out of the earth, the Herculean ex-gladiator emerged from behind him and tapped him on the back. The fat man started and spun around. "Hey, fatso, that lout Udo, Polino's messenger, isn't coming," the boys heard the ex-gladiator say. "Why not? He must have eavesdropped on us last night. He's taken off. Friends of mine caught up with him and took him to Callan's." "Why didn't you go and get Udo right away?" the fat man asked. "You're a sly one, aren't you?" sneered the ex-gladiator. "Of course I tried to. I need my 1,000 gold pieces. I came too late. In the meantime, Callan had sold Udo to a couple of boys, but I took one of them by surprise in the Viva Sacra and captured him. I've got him locked up, and I threatened to kill him if he didn't tell me where Udo was." "Well, and so?" the fat man said. "He's a hard nut, the punk. He's as silent as the graves here." "I'll tell you what to do with him," the fat man said. Caius's friends waited to hear what dreadful suggestion the fat man would come up with. As luck would have it, a metallic noise suddenly carried over to them from somewhere in the cemetery. Then it was still again. The fat man looked around nervously. "We'd better get inside there," he whispered to the ex-gladiator. They both disappeared in the mausoleum, and the boys couldn't hear them talking any more. But the two reappeared in a short time and walked together along the center path where Mucius and Antonius were stationed. Flavius breathed a sigh of relief. He was no coward. He had a part in all their adventures, but this time he shuddered at the thought of having to follow the fearsome ex-gladiator, a monster who threw a rope around one's neck or beat one to the ground with a single blow. To be on the safe side, he remained there a while longer. Then he grabbed his stick and ran over to the mausoleum. Publius, Julius, and Rufus were waiting there. In those last few minutes the moon had vanished behind a wall of clouds and it had grown dark. "I hope the gods stand by Mucius and Antonius," Flavius said anxiously. "Don't worry," Publius replied. "They know well enough how dangerous these two characters are." "On to Xantibus," Julius said. He was second in command and led the boys when Mucius wasn't around. "We're supposed to count to 100, Rufus reminded him. "Oh, that's right," Julius said, and he began to count. But he got only as far as 20. He was struck dumb and stiffened like a mummy in his tracks. A form dressed in white rose from behind a gravestone and slowly turned its head, looking first this way, then that.